Hello and welcome to the first episode of F1 2020, The Classics. In this series we're going to be looking at the classic cars of F1 2020 and its predecessor, F1 2019. These machines, raced over 4 separate decades, have been part of some of the sport's most significant moments, be it championships, wins, or, much like the car we will be looking at today, the beginning of a legacy. This is the Jordan 191. After racing successfully in the lower categories, including British Formula 3 and Formula 3000, Irish racing driver and businessman Eddie Jordan decided to form his own Grand Prix team for an entry in the 1991 Formula 1 season. Changing his team name from Eddie Jordan Racing to Jordan Grand Prix, Eddie enlisted the help of Gary Anderson to design the car. Now, back then, the regulations on engines weren't quite as strict as they are today. Unlike modern F1 cars, turbos weren't allowed, and the hybrid technology in a racing car wasn't even a glint in its mechanical father's eye. Or should that be electronic? But with those exclusions, things were fairly open. McLaren and Honda were introducing a new V12 engine to replace their successful V10 of the previous 2 years. Williams and Renault were working on the French manufacturer's V10 that would evolve into the engine that would power their dominant 1992 car, though more on that another time. And Benetton were making use of a Ford Cosworth V8. Anderson told Motorsport magazine that the 191 was originally meant to house a Judd V8. However, after a stop for a sandwich, a fortuitous encounter with another patron, who so happened to be Bernard Ferguson, who later became director of Motorsport at Cosworth, meant that they could have the Ford Cosworth V8 of the Benetton, albeit a few specs behind. This engine combined with a 6-speed manual gearbox designed by Mark Smith, suspension by Andrew Green, and yes, that's the same Andrew Green who's Racing Point's current technical director, and the bodywork by Anderson formed the car which now needed some drivers. Jordan signed Andrea De Cesaris, an Italian veteran of the sport by this point, competing since the 1980 season and racing for teams like Alfa Romeo, McLaren and Ligier. By Jordan's own admission, he took a chance on the Italian who had been known as De Crasheris in his career. Eddie Jordan's words, not mine.
That is a heavy shot from Andrea De Cesaris.
Oh, De Cesaris sideways, De Cesaris on the grass! He's going over! Oh, De Cesaris, a major accident!
A fast driver prone to incidents, something which came to a head for commentator and former world champion James Hunt when watching De Cesaris' performance at Imola in 1990.
Frost is going to have in the race with his passing the Williams. Oops! And Mansell just managed to hold it with the Dallara in front of him, and really that was De Cesaris doing his usual performance, taking no notice of the leaders. And now we see it again, and you'll see that Mansell is coming inside. He should know he's there. He's leading the race, and look at this idiot.
The other driver Jordan signed to the team was Bertrand Gachot, a French driver who raced under a Belgian super license until 1992, when he changed to a French one, identifying as a European driver, rather than any one particular nationality. Despite failing to qualify for the majority of events he had entered into during his first 2 years in the sport, he was still thought of highly in the paddock, his performances up to this point having been down to the car and not the driver. The pairing would race together for most of the season, with De Cesaris competing the full calendar and Gachot being replaced later on in the season. The opening round of the season at the US Grand Prix at Phoenix saw De Cesaris fail to pre-qualify because of the reliability woes of the car, whilst Gachot managed to put it in P14 on the grid, then racing to an impressive P10, where he was classified despite being unable to finish the race due to an engine failure in the final laps.
Of his a little while ago. There is Gachot now in the pits. The neatly attired Eddie Jordan Racing team from Ireland, very proud of their green colours.
In the following rounds, more reliability problems arose for the team, with both drivers successfully pre-qualifying and qualifying, but both had failures in the race. De Cesaris' engine giving up, whilst Gachot's fuel system went. Gachot was again classified for completing enough laps, but the fact was that the car had failed to see the checkered flag. The true breakthrough, however, was at Canada. The circuit Gilles Villeneuve proved a good hunting ground for the green cars, with not only both Jordans finishing, but both scoring points too. albeit not on pure pace. It was a race of attrition with both McLarens, both Ferraris, Mansell in the Williams and Moreno's Benetton all failing to finish. This seemed to temporarily open the floodgates for Jordan, with points finishes coming in the next 4 rounds: Mexico, France, the UK and Germany, with the Hockenheim Ring in particular being another double points finish for the team. However, despite Gachot getting the fastest lap at Hungary, no more points were to be had for the rest of the season. For the team, luck and a lack of pace would play their part in that, but for Gachot, outside events would prove to be the reason he would fail to score again that year. After a car accident in London in December 1990, Gachot used TS gas on the taxi driver he had collided with, later claiming it was self-defence. His trial was the week prior to the Belgian Grand Prix, and resulted in Gachot being handed a prison sentence. This left Eddie Jordan searching for a replacement driver, and after looking around was offered $150,000 by Mercedes, and that's in 1991 money, so probably an awful lot more today, to run one of their drivers from sports car racing, a chap called... I've got him here somewhere. Michael Schumacher. Schumacher was immediately on the pace at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, showing great promise and skill, qualifying 4 places above De Cesaris and nearly 8/10 faster than his time, despite De Cesaris having driven in Formula 1 since 1980 and having driven the 191 all of pre-season and in-season, and Schumacher had never driven the Spa-Francorchamps circuit before. The race then lined up to be a spectacular showcase of the German rookie's abilities, but cruelly, Jordan's reliability problems resurfaced and caused Schumacher to retire on the very first lap with a clutch problem.
And Michael Schumacher's Grand Prix has ended on the first lap. The German is out. Bitter disappointment for him after the tremendous achievements of practice.
After the weekend, Schumacher was lured away from Jordan to Benetton, despite Eddie Jordan's insistence that a contract had been signed, the team boss even going so far as to use the UK courts to prevent a move. Unsuccessful, Jordan now took on the ousted Roberto Moreno, whose seat at Benetton Schumacher now occupied. However, his tenure only lasted 2 races before being moved to one side for another debut driver, in the form of the incredible Alex Zanardi. Come the season's end, Jordan were amongst the most successful new teams of Formula 1, finishing 5th in a Constructors' Championship with 12 classified finishes, with an additional 7 teams unclassified who had tried to enter and compete in the season. Unfortunately, the 191's successor, the 192, turned out to be a much less competitive machine. The Ford Cosworth V8 was removed in favour of the Yamaha V12 because of costs. The car's questionable reliability worsened, and Jordan rounded out the year with only a single point, finishing 11th in the constructors' standings. The legacy then of this car was the starting point of 2 major journeys in Formula 1. For the Jordan team, it meant the start of a journey which led all the way to 2005, with wins, podium finishes, and even a slight title challenge along the way. After that, the team was Midland, then Spiker, Force India, Racing Point, and next year will be Aston Martin. For the rookie, Michael Schumacher, it would begin a journey that would span a 19-year career, 91 wins, 155 podiums, 77 fastest laps, 68 pole positions, and 7 World Drivers' titles. The first of which he won in 1994, driving the Benetton B194. Though, more on that another time. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, then please consider subscribing for future documentary pieces from F1 2020 The Classics and some more of the comedy content you can see on this channel. This piece was written and performed by Daniel Gilligan and edited by the fantastic Tom Mack.